Mr. Motlanthe, welcome and thanks very much for joining us tonight.
Good evening, John, and good evening to Kaya FM listeners.
Mr. Motlanthe, in Polokwane in 2007, you were vigorously behind Jacob Zuma for president of the ANC and indeed, by obvious implication, president of the country. 5 years later in Mangaung, you saw fit to challenge his leadership. Were you mistaken in Polokwane about the man who would lead the ANC in the country, or has in fact President Zuma changed?
No, John, if you recall the Secretary General's report to the Polokwane conference, one of the issues that were raised in that report was the problem of slates.
Yes.
And so I wasn't myself part of any slate.
Yes.
I simply followed the procedures of being nominated and accepting nomination. But the issue of slates was raised in that report very sharply because I pointed out that because I had to deliver the report on behalf of the National Executive Committee, I pointed out that there was something very strange about it, that the one nomination list excluded, at the heads of both lists was Jacob Zuma and Thabo Mbeki. And both lists excluded the two senior people in the organization. And I said, this can be a reflection of the will of the members of the ANC. So, in a sense, that report indicated and put its finger on the problem of slates. In Mangaung as well, it was the same thing. That because my view was that once you already serve in a leadership position,
yes,
you can't go out and canvass members, because if you do so, then you divide the organization.
Let me ask the question in a different way then.
Yeah.
By the time we reached Mangaung in 2012, your misgivings about the leadership of the country by President Jacob Zuma were sufficiently deep for you to oppose him as president. What were those misgivings?
It's not really opposing the president. It's accepting nomination. I said, and I made it clear, that I will not be part of any arrangement, and that if I'm nominated even by 3 branches, I will accept the nomination.
But surely it's missing the point with respect, Mr. Motlanthe.
Yeah.
You could have said, no, I don't accept nomination because the man in the seat has done a brilliant job. I mean, you must have had misgivings about the way he was running the country. I'd be interested to know what they were and whether you still hold them.
No, that was about ANC processes. So I had misgivings about arranging leadership. I was firmly of the view that the leadership should be a product of the free expression of the will of the members of the ANC.
Isn't that part of the problem and the difficulty that the ANC faces and will face again when it goes to its next elective conference, that it neither encourages and in some ways doesn't allow a free expression of political ambition, despite the fact that behind the scenes people pursue those ambitions sometimes with documented ruthlessness? That wouldn't you be better off having a party saying, I think I can do a good job, this is my platform, let's have an election debate, let's have a primary, and let's go and see may the best man or woman win. Wouldn't you have a healthier party as a result?
No, the internal democratic practices are predicated upon the understanding that each member of the ANC has a right to nominate whomsoever and be nominated for any position.
Yes.
And so the issue of once you are nominated, being asked to motivate is covered in a document called Through the Eye of the Needle. So there is provision for that. The issue is, once once you take away the right of members to nominate whomsoever and be nominated for any position. Once you take that away, then you kill the internal democratic values of the organization.
Thembelihle on Facebook, and by the way, you can give us a call on 086 0000 959. I see Tamsanka is trying to get through, and we'll take that call as soon as he lands. But Thembelihle has 3 questions. I'm going to ask 2 of them. Your views, please, on e-tolls. Thembelihle would like to know. And then this one, I think perhaps a longer question. Do you, sir, think that ordinary South Africans keep voting for what the ANC stands for? Or is it out of fear of the unknown? So 2, e-tolls, and why do people keep voting for the ANC in your view?
Okay, let's start with the second one. I think people keep on voting for the ANC primarily because the ANC is a governing party, and as a governing party, interventions, for instance, that deal with, poverty, like social grants and so on, are dispensed by government. Mm-hmm. And so a governing party benefits by that. A lot of goodwill is generated from that, responsibility of governing. So that's one reason at one level. And that is why when things don't work, when, services are not up to scratch, people express their displeasure through demonstrations and so on, because elections only come once in 5 years, and unless they are pacified ahead of the elections, who knows, they may vote against the ANC.
Can I just do a follow-up question before you deal with the e-tolls? I mean, 2 things, I suppose. The one is, if grants are so central to people's ongoing support for the ANC, doesn't that put the ruling party in a position where they can't make a clear-headed decision about something that some people argue is A, financially sustainable, and B, is not a particularly good way of spending public money? I mean, if the ANC is hitched to that for electoral support, you can't very well dispense with it, particularly if elections get tighter.
No, the point I'm making, John, is that if you go to rural areas of this country, or informal settlements, you'll find there households that have no source of income whatsoever. And their only source of income is the child support grant, old pension, disability grant, and so on. And so, in a sense, I mean, when we do door-to-door in rural areas, you see poverty at its most abject dimension. And yet the same people will say, now we have potable water. Mm-hmm. Now we have our children go to a no-fee school and they are guaranteed 1 meal per day. And so in spite of this grinding poverty, they are still grateful that there's some assistance emanating from government. And for that reason, when time comes for them to choose, they choose the governing party. That's the point I'm trying to make.
E-tolls?
With e-tolls, I was involved, when I was still in government, in the first consultation with, once, this issue became a burning issue, I headed an interministerial committee, and we went and met with all stakeholders, from the owners of trucks right down to the South African Council of Churches. And they then raised issues about the fact that this system is too costly. Upfront, many of them said they accept the principle of, paying for using these facilities and roads. However, they raised serious concerns about the costs, and they recommended that the fuel levy would be, the best way to go. There was a problem with that suggestion in the sense that the Treasury is already imposing a fuel levy, collecting a fuel levy to boost the fiscus.
Mm-hmm.
And the fuel levy means that people in other provinces will have to also pay towards the development of roads in this province. Now,
why couldn't you have considered different fuel prices for Gauteng? I mean, as it is, we pay different prices to coastal provinces because of the cost of getting the fuel here. Why not ring fence it and call it a Gauteng fuel tax?
Well, the point is it would have gone through the roof because already there is a fuel levy.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, Treasury collects that to boost the fiscus. So, in a sense, there is a meeting point here because people say they are prepared to pay. It's the method that they are against. The method of e-toll, they say, is too costly, too expensive. And they worry that the bulk of the money would go to the people who laid out the technology and all of that.
086 00 959. Tamsanka, good evening. Welcome.
How are you?
Fine, and you?
I'm okay, thanks. Good evening to Mr. Motlanthe.
Good evening, sir.
Mr. Motlanthe, I've got some few questions for you.
Yeah.
I was a comrade, I think, for the rest of my 45 years in the ANC.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to constructively criticize the ANC.
Yes.
While Mr. Mandela was still the president.
Yeah.
And some of the comrades, or most of the comrades in Fostoras, they were calling us names that we are sellouts and so forth,
mm-hmm.
including Julius Malema.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Motlanthe, what I want to ask is, when is the ANC going to start to develop the townships to be like Sentin? Because I see most of the ANC black comrades move to the apartheid developed towns. And then, for example, as we speak now, Mr. Motlanthe, I'm walking inside the stadium in Fostoras, which was supposed to be finished in 2010, but it was not done.
So Tamsanka concerned Mr. Motlanthe about the pace and depth of development in places like Vosloorus and wonders why a stadium that was meant to be ready in 2010 isn't ready now.
Yes, no, there is uneven development. If you go to Soweto now, you will find that there are parks that compare favorably with any park in any suburb. And people use those parks, and those parks are maintained. The one next to Regina Mundi is called Togoza Park. There's a horticultural unit that looks after that park. Every day it's cleaned and so on. All the streets in Soweto are tarred. And by just addressing that issue of tarring streets, it is improved on how people deal with, refuse removal and all of that. And the townships look completely different. Orlando Stadium is being upgraded. There are malls in Soweto. There's even a theater in Soweto. So what I'm acknowledging is that there is uneven development. And that's a function of the local municipalities as well as national government, in terms of addressing the infrastructure backlogs.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Motlanthe, I want to go back a little and then use it to look at a current issue. Mpuleleng on Facebook says, your views on the delaying tactics around the Marikana report and the fact that unemployment is still very high. And given your past in the National Union of Mine Workers, former Secretary General, National Education Officer, you spent a long time in the union movement. What are your thoughts, A, about Marikana, but B, more broadly, the state of unionism in the mining industry, which appears to be somewhat conflictual and contested?
Marikana is a tragedy. Marikana, leaves all of us with pain in our hearts because the violence that accompanied the splitting of the union and the violent manner of, suppressing and bringing to an end that conflict is something that I think will remain a black spot in the history of this country. And so everything possible should be done to bring closure to this issue, because the social determinants of the conflict itself, the migrant labor system, the fact that the unions and employers had agreed to a living out allowance that took workers out of the compounds into informal settlements and shacks. All these are problems that ought to be addressed if they are not to be repeated going forward. And the starting point, of course, is to deal with the Commission report.
What are your views on the time it's taking to engage with it? I mean, the President today said he's applying his mind to it, and people would, I'm sure, understand that. But isn't there an urgency about it that government's perhaps not correctly reading?
Well, from this point of view of affected families, those who lost their loved ones, and, there's anxiety about the report. And so if you say to them, wait, they don't understand why they should be waiting. But of course, if the President says he's applying his mind, that should be accepted.
Isn't there a larger message being sent by the public that they fear that we have become a society, to some degree like the society of the past, where the powerful's interests, the interests of the powerful, will always be put first? Isn't that the message people are saying? Yes, there's specific concerns that opportunities to make civil claims might be affected in terms of those claims prescribing, but more fundamentally, people are saying, we don't trust this. We don't trust this process because we've seen too much that suggests the powerful come first.
I think that's, you've put your finger on it. I think there's mistrust. And of course, trust is earned, and trust can only be restored through force of example rather than precept. Is
the ANC within its ranks, and obviously it's a party of great diversity, but is there sufficient critical mass within the ANC saying that that's a deep problem, that yes, while we may have the vote, we may not have the full trust of even those people who voted for us? It's a reluctant mandate in some places.
Yes, I think the ANC is, sensitive to that now. There is a realization that, there's a need to double the efforts of connecting with the constituency as well as communities here.
Is the opposition perhaps in a paradoxical way your best friend in this regard? The fact that the DA has made what people call a bold step around leadership, the EFF is winning support with the quality of its arguments and the way they express it. Is there a part of you that says, well, maybe this is exactly what the ANC needs, some serious competition to get us match fit for the next election?
Well, every party will angle for the best advantage.
Yes.
However, progress is a working out of opposites, and so you need competition. Otherwise, the temptation to rest on your laurels can be very high. That is why realignment and the establishment of competition is quite necessary, actually.
A fruitless expenditure of government money, either through, in some instances, corruption, or through too much being paid for a service provided or goods delivered. Why are we still battling with those problems? Because we could have been having this conversation 10 years ago.
Yeah, well, we're still battling. I mean, the backlog for housing in a place like Gauteng province, it's a catchment province.
Yes.
Many people flock into Gauteng. So there's a backlog there And I think it would be fair if the relevant authorities keep people informed as to what progress is being made, and at what point would they be allocated these RDP houses and so on. Now, the Tshwane matter is a horse of a different color. The billing system is a headache everywhere.
Yes.
I myself, had to resort to prepaid meters because, the electricity bill was unaffordable.
Here's Ngobeni on Twitter who says, please ask Mr. Motlanthe if he feels there's nothing wrong with Nkandla and why has he not voiced his views on the matter?
Well, I was a member of cabinet.
Yes.
And I expressed my views in cabinet, which I can't express in public. And the process, as I understand it, is been dealt with because it's in the public domain. There's a public protector's report. We are at a point where Parliament is waiting for the Minister of Police to say what amount, if any, is due to be paid by the President.
When you say you're in cabinet, you expressed a view, but you accept cabinet co-responsibility, do we then need to say that whatever the findings are of Nkandla, that the whole cabinet takes responsibility for it? And if there is to be collective responsibility, perhaps there ought to be collective punishment if it's found that the law was broken?
No, the law doesn't work that way, unfortunately for you, John. Yeah.
Well, you don't have to make me happy. We want the right thing, but please continue.
Yeah, and I think I'm not qualified to speak on this matter in public, precisely because I myself once served as president, so it wouldn't be proper. It would be impolitic for me to express a view on this matter in public.
Given the depth of your concerns about how our democracy unfolds and the economic underpinning of a more just society, do you miss not being in power? Do you miss not being in a position to say, let's do this thing, it's a good idea, let's find 50 million and fix all the school toilets in Gauteng? Is that a gap in your life?
No, I think citizens are the ones who have the power. Administrators are meant to serve the public, and so I feel quite comfortable being a citizen and being part of the power block that can ensure that the wheels of government turn a little bit more swiftly.
Isn't that a romantic view, though? Because, yes, citizens, for example, if there's industrial pollution of a river in Kroonstad or somewhere in the Western Cape, yes, we can raise our hands, we can go on Twitter, if you're as lucky as I am to have a public platform like a radio show. But fundamentally, the person who can make the real difference is the person, man or woman, or group of men or women, who can say, let's fix this thing. Let's find money, speak to Treasury, let's get 50 million and let's put those houses up and let's get it done quickly. There must be something about that you miss, surely.
No.
Not at all?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay, well, that's 2 no's, so we'll have to accept it. Mr. Motlanthe, a couple of questions for you around the xenophobia issue. You were talking at Rhodes University earlier this week during a debate. You were hosted by the Pan-African Youth Dialogue, and you made the point, I think in the course of the debate, that the use of force to combat xenophobic violence is unnecessary. I wasn't there for the speech, I'm just going on news reports, but perhaps you could tell us, first of all, what point you were making there, but secondly, more broadly, your thoughts on something that many of us consider to be a bit of a curse on our country.
Well, the xenophobia is something that happens in many countries on our continent and other continents as well. The discriminator, what sets the South African form apart from the rest is the violence which accompanies xenophobic expressions.
Yes.
That, people are targeted and even killed. That's not common.
Yes.
Yes. And so the fact that government is now documenting these foreigners will help, because once you know...
Provided it works. I mean, they've been trying to do this for years.
I don't think the attempt was the same as now. There's a sense of agency, I think, in the current attempt. Because, whenever I go past Home Affairs offices, you always find these people lined up trying to be registered, to be documented. And it appears to me that Home Affairs is not tackling this issue with the requisite, enthusiasm. But at the moment, I think in the wake of the recent violent flash up, they are now more, determined to ensure that people are documented. Because once people are documented, you know where they are. You can factor them into the planning and so on.
086 0000 959. Hlalifang is calling from Rockville. Hi, Hlalifang.
Hello, how's it?
Fine, and you?
I'd like to also just greet Tate Motlanthe. Tate Motlanthe, I really appreciate the fact that you were with us during your time.
Yes, ma'am.
And I really appreciate, I was really sad when you left. But another thing is, I want to ask Marikana, I'm a bit frustrated because the president is meant to respond about it and give a report, but nothing has been done about it. And there's the deadline that comes with it.
Okay, thanks. We did deal with that earlier, Hlalifang, but Mr. Motlanthe, do you want to add anything on that, Marikana?
No, except that, the president is aware that there are deadlines and he's asked for a little bit more time to mull over it. I'm sure he will release it, yeah.
Don't we have a difficulty with that in South Africa, though, that we tend to institutionalize our indecision about difficult issues, that things go to commissions? Don't you have a sense of frustration about that, especially now that you're a citizen and not a person in power?
Well, the Falam Commission, it spent lots of time in,
yes,
trying to get to the bottom of what really happened. And the fact that they've now submitted their report to the president, and the president says he's going through it. I have no idea as to what size of tome it is. So I think it's only fair to accept his bona fides in asking for a little bit more time. Yeah.
086 0000 959. Bunolo from Glen Vista. Hi.
Hi, John. How are you?
Fine, and yourself?
I'm fine, thanks. I just wanted to ask Mr. Motlanthe, watching the elective conference of the ANC and that of the DA, the contrasts were quite stark. In the DA, people felt free. There was no animosity between the two camps. And every time ANC goes and elects, there's always these reports that are coming out that, somebody asked Kgalema not to stand because this and that and the other. What is his take on personalities? Politics of personalities in the organization.
Okay, and let me just add another question here, which is of a more personal note, and you can answer those two together. Let me just find. Well, please speak on the issue of politics of personality and the quality of conferences within the ANC. I'm sure he's not talking about Mangong, which seem to go without any acrimony, but some of the regional conferences, like in eThekwini, have been problematic.
Yes, the elective conferences of the ANC are meant to strengthen organization. And as I said earlier on, they are based on the constitutional provision that says each and every member in good standing has a right to nominate whomsoever and be nominated for any position. So the fact that we are a governing party and that these positions of leadership and responsibility also translate into material benefits makes this to be a fiercely contested area. And I think it's a problem that the ANC has to find a solution to. Otherwise, it entangles the organization and tarnishes the image of the organization and prestige of the organization, because it's as though what matters is not, the service, but personal vested interest.
What would you say to people, and they are your severe critics, but I think some of them come from within the party, who would say it's all very well to say we need to change that, but that in fact this is a fundamental element now of the glue that holds the party together, that jockeying for position and position bringing material benefit is in fact what puts together political alliances rather than shared beliefs about what the economy needs or how best to educate our children?
Well, there was a time when the ANC was not a governing party.
Yes.
When the only rewards that you could get by being associated with the ANC was injury or death or prison or exile. But of course, after 1994, the character of the ANC changed. And unfortunately, we didn't have the requisite mechanism of ensuring that the ANC continues to be characterized by the commitment to serve rather than to pursue personal aggrandizement and benefits.
Do you know what that mechanism is? I would imagine it's a package of mechanisms, and if you could share with us, A, what those mechanisms are, and B, how you'd put them in place.
Well, you need checks and balances, both checks and balances both in the ANC itself and in the institutions of democracy, so that those who try to line up their pockets with public funds must be brought to book.
Have we failed to do that?
No, the fact that from time to time people are exposed and so on is important. It's very important, and those are the issues that that we should reinforce. But it has not reached a point where there are clear deterrents, and I think once we reach that point, even inside the ANC, people will know that you fight for these positions with the aim of being connected to syndicates and so on would not take you anywhere. It's going to bring you misery instead.
Here's a question of a personal nature. Mr. Mahlaule says, is former President Motlanthe an Alex native or a Meadowlands native? And then he says, it's a bragging rights question. So Alex, Meadowlands, which is it?
Both, because, my family lived in Alexander and moved to Meadowlands in 1959 through the forced removals of that time. Yeah.
Let's ask you just to conclude with some of the issues around race that you raised in, amongst other platforms, your speech at Rhodes University on Monday that I refer to. What are your thoughts about the nature of the race debate in South Africa? Is it too robust, or is it perhaps not robust enough? Or am I asking the wrong question?
Well, I think we are in a phase of consolidating our democracy, and our democracy is based on the Constitution and non-racialism, the principle of non-racialism. And so there's no place, no room for race. But of course, because we've only moved out of our past for 21 years, the shadow of that past is still with us. The categories of skin color,
yes,
are still part of our vocabulary, and still part of our reality. But I think the important point is always to emphasize the fact that when all is said and done, we are human beings, and therefore we want to create a united, democratic, non-racial society.
Some people are asking, and there are quite a few tweets, I'm not going to read them individually, if you were nominated again for national office by ANC branches, what would you do?
I would decline, because my view is that leaders must lead in the time given to them and vanish.
Vanish altogether?
Vanish, because if you go back, then you allow your ashes to choke even the little fire that you would have lit here.
And a final question, Mr. Motlanthe, because we still have a little more time. As a unionist and then obviously further in government, you would have sat opposite people in industry and negotiated with them about getting them to do more and do their redistributive things better than they have up to now. If you could get industry and those who hold economic power to do one or maybe two things, what would your challenge to them be?
Well, it's to grow the economy so that, more opportunities can be created, more resources can be created to address the accumulated backlogs in infrastructure and so on. I think, in 2010, John, when we were hosting the FIFA World Cup,
yes,
the Blue Bulls in Pretoria had qualified, to play in the semi-finals. And their stadium had already been taken over by FIFA.
Right.
So they didn't have a local stadium. And they looked around for one where they could drive, or their supporters could drive to. And they found Orlando Stadium. And for the first time, they went and used Orlando Stadium as their home base.
Yes.
And they had a roaring time. Their supporters had a wonderful time in Soweto. They also had, the benefit of getting 750 milliliters of beer,
yes,
for a price that, in Pretoria gets them 375 milliliters.
Yes.
And so they won the semi-finals and they went back to Soweto for the finals.
Which they won as well.
And which they won as well, and they had a roaring time. And what that said to me was that if we can address the infrastructure backlogs, people will want to live and, enjoy themselves in every part of South Africa. The problem now, at the moment, is that literally we are two countries in one. The one is underdeveloped, the other is developed to the level where it could host the FIFA World Cup. And so I think the residue of racial discrimination manifests itself in
yes,
the infrastructure backlog. If we can address that, people will settle anyway.
Many thanks for joining us tonight on Kai FM, and we hope to have you again. Kgalema Motlanthe, thanks a lot.
Thank you, John, and thank you to your listeners.